July 25th, 1944. The sun rose over Normandy, a pale orb struggling to pierce the early morning mist. General Fritz Bayerlein, standing at his forward command post near Marigny, watched his elite Panzer Lehr Division arrayed across the hedgerows, a force once unmatched in training, experience, and morale. He had seen combat in Poland, France, North Africa, and the Eastern Front. He had survived tank engagements, infantry assaults, and artillery barrages that would have crushed lesser men. He understood war. He understood the importance of anticipation, of exploiting advantages before the enemy could strike. And yet, on this morning, as light spilled over the fields, he felt an unease that no experience could erase. Bayerlein's division had arrived in Normandy in early June with 316 tanks, meticulously maintained, their crews disciplined, trained, and ready to fight. Panthers, Jagdpanthers, half-tracks, armored cars, all of them the pinnacle of German armored doctrine. But the months since D-Day had been merciless. By July 25th, only 93 tanks remained operational. Fuel was scarce, ammunition depleted, spare parts non-existent. The relentless pressure of American artillery, infantry, and air attacks had chipped away at every advantage, grinding elite soldiers into exhaustion. Mechanized units were immobilized, supply lines severed, and repair shops destroyed in earlier raids. The once feared Panzer Lehr was now a shadow of itself, vulnerable to attack, stretched thin, and facing an enemy who refused to tire. And now the sky was clearing. The clouds that had shielded his division for weeks were dissolving, revealing the open air above Normandy. Bayerlein knew exactly what was coming. Operation Cobra, the Allied breakout, was underway. The Allied High Command had assembled everything necessary to pierce the German lines. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft would strike in coordination, and the Panzer Lehr, once the spearhead of German counteroffensives, would be the first to feel the storm. At 8:30 a.m., the first jets appeared on the horizon. 4 P-47 Thunderbolts screamed across the fields, diving in unison, their engines roaring, propellers spinning like knives through the air. Then 8, then 20, then formations beyond counting, a mechanical swarm descending upon the German lines. Each aircraft carried 8 rockets and 2,500 pounds of bombs, capable of annihilating infantry, armor, and fortifications with terrifying precision. They dived from thousands of feet, releasing their ordnance in cascades that shook the earth, uprooted trees, and obliterated centuries-old hedgerows in seconds. Panthers, the most formidable tanks in the German arsenal, were flipped by shock waves, armor crumpled, guns silenced. Bayerlein's radio operators screamed into headsets, desperate to relay reports of destruction. Forward units were obliterated. Infantry lay dead or dying in craters filled with earth and rubble. Ammunition depots erupted, fuel trucks ignited, the battlefields transformed into a chaos of fire, smoke, and shattered earth. Bayerlein realized with cold clarity that this was not defeat by tactics, not the result of infantry maneuver or tank duel. This was annihilation from above, from an enemy that could strike anywhere, at any time, from altitudes beyond reach, beyond response, beyond hope. For 8 minutes the first wave lasted. 30 seconds of silence. Then the next wave arrived, followed by the next, relentless and mechanical. Each pass of P-47s, then B-17s, reshaped the terrain. Command posts, supply depots, vehicles, and men vanished under a hail of explosives. Each successive wave compounded the destruction, and with each blast, the Panzer Lehr's capacity to fight ebbed further. By 11 a.m., a fragile silence fell over the battlefield. 20 minutes of stillness after the first waves of P-47s had screamed across the fields. General Bayerlein, heart pounding, sent runners forward to assess the damage. What they reported was beyond comprehension. The forward battalion, 900 men, 14 Panthers, 32 half-tracks, had been decimated. Casualties were catastrophic, vehicles destroyed, survivors wandering in shock, unable to form any coherent defense. A runner staggered back, his uniform soaked in ash and blood. Command post collapsed. 2nd Battalion reports 300 men from 900. All tanks destroyed. We have no water, no food. We cannot rebuild. There was no time to mourn. The Allies had brought in the heavy bombers. 371 B-17 flying fortresses loomed overhead, releasing tons of explosives across 17 square kilometers in a single 90-minute operation. Each bomb was a mechanical certainty, an instrument of destruction designed to obliterate anything in its path. Trees, hedgerows, and centuries-old terrain markers vanished under a hail of explosives. Panthers, the most formidable tanks in the German arsenal, were flipped by shock waves, armor crumpled, guns silenced. Bayerlein's radio operators screamed into headsets, desperate to relay reports of destruction. Forward units were obliterated. Infantry lay dead or dying in craters filled with earth and rubble. Ammunition depots erupted, fuel trucks ignited, the battlefield transformed into a chaos of fire, smoke, and shattered earth. Bayerlein realized with cold clarity that this was not defeat by tactics, not the result of infantry maneuver or tank duel. This was annihilation from above, from an enemy that could strike anywhere, at any time, from altitudes beyond reach, beyond response, beyond hope. For 8 minutes the first wave lasted, 30 seconds of silence. Then the next wave arrived, followed by the next, relentless and mechanical. Each pass of P-47s, then B-17s, reshaped the terrain. Command posts, supply depots, vehicles, and men vanished under a hail of explosives. Each successive wave compounded the destruction, and with each blast, the Panzer Lehr's capacity to fight ebbed further. Forward battalions sent fragmented reports. 200 men became 50, Panthers reduced to half, then fewer still. Ammunition and fuel depots ignited, sending fireballs visible for kilometers. Medics and mechanics perished at their posts. Command posts were obliterated, communication lines severed. By 1:30 p.m., estimates placed casualties at 2,500 men, half the division gone, and operational tanks at a pitiful 7. The division that had arrived in Normandy with 93 tanks was now barely functional, unable to mount coordinated resistance. At 2 p.m., the bombing ceased. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The landscape was a cratered moonscape. Dust hung in the air, smoke still curled from burning vehicles, and the distant roar of Allied engines signaled the advance of the 7th Corps. Bayerlein, surveying the destruction, understood the truth of modern war. Tactical brilliance, discipline, and courage were meaningless against a system that could deliver overwhelming force at will. His elite soldiers had been trained to counter tanks, infantry, artillery, but nothing could counter a production system that replaced losses faster than they could be inflicted. The 7th Corps advanced immediately, 3 infantry divisions and 2 armored divisions, moving across a landscape rendered nearly impassable by craters and wreckage. Organized resistance collapsed. Bayerlein committed the remaining 7 Panthers to a desperate counterattack. The tanks were tactically superior, their 75mm guns capable of destroying Shermans at over 2 kilometers, but numbers, mobility, and logistics mattered more. For every Sherman destroyed, another advanced behind it, fueled, armed, and supported by relentless supply lines. The American system of production and logistics made attrition meaningless. By nightfall, the breakthrough was complete. The Panzer Lehr line was shattered. The division, once a demonstration of German armored perfection, was incapable of mounting an offensive again. Losses were irreplaceable. Production and supply could not compensate for the annihilation inflicted in 90 minutes of air assault. Bayerlein's men, his vehicles, his command structure, all that remained of the elite Panzer Lehr were fragments scattered across fields scarred by explosions and fire. Bayerlein understood a profound lesson that day. Modern war was decided long before soldiers met on the battlefield. Factories in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, refineries in Texas, the logistics of assembly lines and production schedules, these determined victory. Tactical skill mattered, but only within the limits set by industrial capacity. America could destroy, replace, and advance with precision and speed beyond comprehension. Germany could not. No maneuver, no counterattack, no act of individual heroism could reverse the arithmetic of overwhelming production. As night fell, Bayerlein surveyed the remnants of his division: 7 operational Panthers, scattered men, burned-out vehicles, shattered morale. The mathematics of war had revealed themselves in the ruins. Tactical brilliance had failed. Industrial supremacy had triumphed. He knew in that present moment the war was already lost, not due to lack of courage, skill, or leadership, but because the system opposing him was simply too vast, too coordinated, too relentless. Bayerlein watched the destruction with a mixture of disbelief and resignation. He had trained soldiers, built a division capable of facing any armored threat, and fought with the precision and courage demanded of a German general. Yet all of it had been rendered meaningless by a force he could not fight, a force beyond skill, beyond bravery, beyond planning. The Americans had won the arithmetic of war long before they set foot on the ground. In that moment, Bayerlein internalized a lesson that would define modern warfare. Victory is not merely a product of tactics, heroism, or ingenuity on the battlefield. It is the result of systems, production, logistics, training, supply chains that sustain armies long before combat begins. No division, no matter how elite, can survive against an opponent capable of replacing men and machines faster than they are destroyed. Tactical excellence is secondary to industrial supremacy. Panzer Lehr was eventually withdrawn from combat. Reconstituted in name only, it would never regain its former elite status. The soldiers who survived were scattered, the equipment replaced by conscripts and hastily repaired tanks, morale shattered, experience lost. The Americans, by contrast, continued their advance, maintaining pressure, exploiting every opportunity created by their overwhelming logistical advantage. Normandy became a proving ground for the principle that production and preparation often outweigh valor and planning. Bayerlein never forgot that day. July 25, 1944, marked a turning point not just for his division, but for the Wehrmacht's understanding of the modern battlefield. The destruction of Panzer Lehr was not a failure of leadership or courage. It was a demonstration of the arithmetic of industrial war. Factories, refineries, and assembly lines had determined the outcome before soldiers ever met on the battlefield. Modern war, Bayerlein realized, is decided long before the first shot is fired. The equations of logistics, production, and supply define the limits of strategy. Courage, skill, and tactical brilliance matter within the boundaries established by industrial capacity. On that shattered Normandy landscape, amid the ruins of his once proud division, Bayerlein understood it fully, irrevocably, and with a clarity that no battlefield could obscure. The Panzer Lehr had fought valiantly, but the war was already decided. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.